Johnny Depp's attorney had a bombshell conversation over suing Casey Anthony for false allegations. According to JD's attorney, Casey Anthony's father has a case that parallels JD's in many ways. Hey there, by the way, let's just get started on this.
Like, what makes you take the case versus not take a case like this? What would be some of the factors that you would take into account here?
Well, Vinny, as you know, and you're assuming truth, but truth is always a defense in any defamation case. So due diligence on that point, i.e. whether the allegations are true, has to be done and has to be done extensively, more so than in a general commercial case, because the attorney has to be as sure as he or she can be that the allegations are false before he would take the case or advise the client to proceed. And then you go on to other factors we can discuss.
Go ahead. What are some of the other factors you're going to take a look at there?
Well, the other factors you would discuss are whether these are allegations of fact or allegations of opinion, which aren't, as you know, allegations of opinion are not actionable. In this case, I think you clear that hurdle because the accusation of being a pederast, it's a pretty clear allegation. It's an allegation of a crime, and it's a crime so heinous in our society, or really any society, that it is considered defamation per se. So the damages to the plaintiff, again, under your hypothesis, assuming the falsity of the allegations, this is a particularly heightened form of defamation per se. But there's another factor I think you're going to get at, and I shouldn't anticipate your questions because I'm not that smart. But another factor you always consider, and it was relevant in the Depp case as well, is you consider whether the potential defendant, as a practical matter, would have the means to satisfy any judgment.
So let me ask you this. Before we get to the money aspect of it, do you ever look at the person making the statement? So say, hypothetically, the person is a convicted liar, right? Someone who's an admitted liar, someone who made an entire documentary talking about how she lied, someone who was convicted in court of lying. Does that come into play as well in evaluating the strength of your case if you're accusing a convicted liar of defamation?
Absolutely, Vinny, and I should have said that you consider the credibility and the record of both the plaintiff and the defendant. And in this case, as you point out, though she was acquitted of the murder back in 2011, she was convicted of 4 counts of giving false information to law enforcement. And as a matter, although some statements were made by her counsel, it's very clear that she changed her story about how Kaylee, came to be murdered. It's outrageous.
Changed it a bunch of times. So explain to folks how this would go down. Then we all watched Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard. So if it's George Anthony versus Casey Anthony, we'll talk about Peacock in a moment. But if it's George Anthony versus Casey Anthony facing off, she'd have to testify. And if she's accusing him of being responsible for the death of her daughter, can you put her on the stand and question her about her role potentially in the death of her daughter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You would put her on in deposition, of course, before you put her on at trial, and you would walk her through every false statement that she's made, every contradictory statement. She could always take the fifth.
Wait, let me ask you about that. Can she take the fifth if she's been criminally acquitted of the murder?
That's as always, you ask the best question. And if she faces if any further charge would constitute double jeopardy, then George's lawyer could say there's that she's not entitled to take the fifth, and that would be resolved by the judge. But I think George's lawyer would have a very strong argument that the fifth would not be available to her, unless I suppose she could make a creative argument about potential perjury convictions, new perjury convictions. But in any event, however she tries to get unwound from that particular axle, I think you would have all of that in the form of testimony. And I think she would just be in a very, very difficult place were she to be a defendant in a defamation case.
And my belief, that case would be perhaps even more revealing than the criminal trial was.
Yes, it would, because their discovery in the civil context, as you know, is a very broad standard. Anything reasonably calculated to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence. And because these particular defamatory statements go right to the heart of what happened to Kaylee and what allegedly happened to Casey, all of this would be fair game. This would be a disaster for Casey Anthony. And, opening up this can of worms by doing this docu-series really would not have been something any attorney would have advised.
Yeah, and the one question that has been answered there, I haven't heard it anywhere, is whether or not she got paid. I'm presuming there was some payment either for her interviews, her participation, or some pictures or whatever that she may have provided, but I don't know. She may not have been paid for the whole thing. All right, so let's get back to that other statement where you were talking about money, which is, if an attorney's going to take a case, there's got to be, some way to satisfy a potential judgment. I don't know if she has two nickels to rub together. She may have a few dollars here and there, but nothing substantial. But this was a docuseries that was produced by someone. It was placed onto a streaming service. If, and again, this is the big if these statements are not true, would they be potential defendants in the case as well? Would it be, who could be on the hook?
Yes, that's where you would probably go. And again, assuming that she is judgment proof, which is an assumption, but not an unreasonable one, unless she was paid a lot for this docuseries, then I think you would have to look for a deep pocket. And the deep pocket could be the producers of the docuseries, who could be brought in as defendants. Publications, producers of these things are brought in all the time. Standards are somewhat different, but yes, I think if you were to proceed on behalf of George, I think you would have to advise George that you would want to be looking potentially at the producers of the docuseries as potential defendants. Yeah,
and this is a pipe dream of mine, but I don't think it'll happen, that if the case is brought, that it's just George versus Casey, and he's doing it not so much for the money, but to clear his name. And that would take an incredible sacrifice by attorneys to do that for free, pretty much, because I don't think, again, she doesn't have any money.